Welcome to the We Watch This Movie podcast, where we sit down and dissect the latest and greatest in movies. I'm Dan, joined by the man with over 2,000 films on his watch list. Jackson, how you doing, mate?
Ich bin fantastisch. Wie geht's dir?
I wasn't expecting that. Good to hear, mate. We thank you all for tuning into our first 4 episodes. It's been a great reception so far, and we're going to continue on for many to come. Jackson, we're locked away with COVID-19 now. How are you doing down there? You staying sane?
Staying mostly sane. I've been working from home this week. The toilet buckets are getting pretty full, having not left my bedroom now for 4 or 5 days. If you can come help me out, that'd be fantastic. Otherwise, we're doing well. That watch list is not shrinking as well.
It's not shrinking.
No, I think it's up to 2,100 now. I think I should probably just delete the Letterboxd app. Shout out though, it is a great app.
That's a fantastic app. Yeah, I'm struggling as well, but we'll get through it. With all the movies we've got to watch, Jackson. Today we're going to take a look at Jojo Rabbit, the acclaimed movie from writer-director Taika Waititi. We'll discuss that along with some movies that we watched this week. Jackson, how does that sound?
Fantastisch.
Beautiful. And also thanks to our sponsor for today's episode, Display. We'll talk about them a little bit later. Jackson, tell us a little bit about Jojo Rabbit.
You're here? Oh, God. Nothing makes sense anymore. Yeah, I know. It's definitely not a good time to be a Nazi.
Johannes Belzer, Jojo, is a lonely German boy whose world is turned upside down when he discovers his single mother, Rosie, is hiding a young Jewish girl, Elsa, in their attic. Aided only by his idiotic imaginary friend, Adolf Hitler, Jojo must confront his blind nationalism as World War II rages on. Dan, let's get into it. What did you think of Jojo Rabbit?
Jojo Rabbit was phenomenal.
Wow.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. This was my second viewing now for the podcast. First time watched it in cinemas when we were allowed to go in late last year.
God, feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
It does. I'm missing it already. I don't know about you, but...
Missing those crusty seats that should have been cleaned 6 or 7 movies ago and they just haven't gotten to them.
That's it. The popcorn everywhere, the
popcorn, the spilt drink that you probably left the last time you were there a week ago.
The overpriced chalk tops. Yeah, unexpectedly phenomenal. The amount of passion and heart put into this film from Taika, from everyone involved, was really commendable. I don't think it should have been this good either for the subject matter. You know, balancing the comedy with the drama elements. I thought they nailed it. I've seen a lot of reviews online. I went and researched some of these reviews to see what the critics had thought, and
I'm glad to hear you did your research.
And yeah, for once. And a lot of them thought that part was misguided, that didn't quite come together in terms of balancing the comedy with the dramatic elements. But I thought that was one of the best parts of the film. Without Taika in this, he's really making a mark in Hollywood right now. He's made a couple of good films. You know, Thor Ragnarok, everyone knows him from. And he's made a massive mark in movies in the last decade or so. I mean, the guy had mainly directed low budget affair in his native homeland, New Zealand, and you know, movies with budgets of 1 million, 2 million. We think to films like Boy, where I remember at the time I was working at a video store when that dropped in 2010, and that was a really popular flick, a real feel-good movie, very similar to this. And then also had was it The Hunt for the Wilder People with Julian Dennison? Yeah, and Julian Dennison went on to some fame in Deadpool 2. And I remember some of those Taika Waititi films and like, wow, this guy's going to be someone to watch as a really talented writer-director. Sure enough, you said he makes Thor Ragnarok, goes from a $2 million budget to a $150 million budget. So clearly he's got a lot of talent and clearly Hollywood loves him. And yeah, I think my sentiments echo yours when I was in the cinema too. Obviously, he used a bit of that Thor Ragnarok cash as well. and pumped it into this, because this isn't a film that you could pitch to people and get an astounding yes from.
No, definitely not. He certainly has earned himself quite the reputation for taking some tough material and really putting a really positive spin and a whimsical tone to it. I think back to seeing this in the cinemas. I was lucky enough to catch it there too, and I had similar thoughts to you. I enjoyed the experience. It didn't quite blow me away the first time I saw it. I thought some of the handling and the tonal shifts in the film between, most of it's shot through Jojo's perspective, and it's very playful, very childlike and innocent. And then we have these really harsh shifts to the bleakness and darkness of World War II. Almost going from like a Pixar film to a really dark Spielberg picture like Saving Private Ryan or Schindler's List. And that for me was a little messy when I saw it in the cinemas. On a rewatch though, I have to agree, it was an amazing experience, and I love it. I'd return to this time and time again.
It's extremely rewatchable, and it's
so quotable and so much great music. So quotable,
yeah, great music, great acting. It was a breath of fresh air. That's what I tell people. I say, go out and see this film. It's a breath of fresh air. It's something different. It's not your typical movie. It's a little bit artsy. It'll have you.
It reminds you a bit of a Wes Anderson film at times, with how colourful it is, and some of just how the shots are framed. But it's not too quirky. It's very accessible.
And there was just a lot to admire about the film, Jackson, from a cinematic standpoint, in terms of not just the acting, but the cinematography, the editing, the costume design. This had a lot of recognition across Hollywood as well, in terms of Oscar nominations, Golden Globes, that sort of thing. It really ended up getting into a lot of people's eyeballs in the end. I think it did quite a good number at the box office.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, how about we get right into it?
You want to get into spoilers?
Let's get right into it. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of this film, because there is a hell of a lot to dissect.
For the people that haven't seen it yet, let's just give them a quick roundup. Your final thoughts, sort of non-spoiler final thoughts.
If you haven't seen this yet, go see it. In fact, pause the podcast, come back to it once you've watched it, and then listen to what we've got to say.
Yep, spot on. All right, spoilers, Jackson.
Let's go.
Spoiler alert. So, spoilers, Jackson. A fantastic lead performance from Roman Griffin Davis. And a lot of the film rests on his shoulders, really. But
small shoulders too, but he does a stellar job.
Thankfully, Taika is really good with child actors. He really knows how to get the best out of them. We've seen it before, as you said, with some of those other films, Boy being another standout. He's got something where he can work with these younger actors and bring the best out of them.
Yeah, he's got a real knack, and even in some of the interviews you watch with Taika Waititi, he comes across as this wise figure, almost like the classic stereotype of a mentor, and just how he passes on some words of wisdom, and he seems very humble, very empathetic, and it clearly comes across in some of the performances he gets from not only his child actors, but some of his older actors too. You mentioned Roman Griffin Davis, and he does a fantastic job in this. How good is his best friend Yorkie, Archie Yates? Oh my God.
He was fantastic.
On a rewatch as well. He's so good. And they even
so cute.
Some of his quotes even get a bit meta, where he talks about, I don't think I can die, after he comes back from a war scene, and amazing. Why they haven't got Yorkie dolls made yet, I've got no idea.
He was fantastic. He brought another bit of light to this film, bit of comedic relief that was much needed at certain times, and he was just cute.
Especially in that third act.
Especially in the third act, exactly. Well, let's dive into those tones that tonal shifts that we were talking about, Jackson. In particularly, there's a scene, we'll dive into it straight away, where we go from Jojo with his mother Rosie, being lovable, having some good conversations, and then out of nowhere we see her feet hanging. She's been killed. What were your emotions when you saw that first time in the cinema?
First time in the cinema, that was fairly troubling. For the most part, the film had quite a whimsical and jovial tone, very childlike, as we follow Jojo's footsteps throughout this world. And even early on, some of the violence is played up for laughs, almost like a live action cartoon. We have in the Hitler Youth Camp, we've got a child getting stabbed, and they're killing a rabbit, and it's all just kind of played for laughs, and the tone of it is a little bit jarring. And yeah, when Rosie is killed off, she's found to be working against the the Nazis, then that was really, really harsh. And especially later on in the third act as well, when the town's invaded, that was another tonal shift that was quite jarring the first time I saw it. On a rewatch, though, I didn't mind it so much. When I knew what was coming, I was able to enjoy it and get swept up in the story more. And the screenplay, which did win at last year's Academy Awards the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay, is so good, so fantastic. While these things feel like they come out of left field, and it's especially when Rosie dies, it's a real gut punch. Everything is set up and everything is paid off beautifully. Earlier in the film, maybe 20, 25 minutes before, Rosie takes Jojo and shows Jojo some Jews, or at least some Jewish sympathizers, who are hanging in the middle of town. And that's quite a confronting sequence, especially since Jojo's view of the Nazis is just as idols to look up to, particularly his view as Adolf Hitler, a father figure. And then it's really confronted by some of these sequences. Did you notice as well that particularly after Rosie dies, Jojo loses his Nazi uniform and his black Gestapo uniform? From that point on, it's gone. And part of how these things are set up, especially on a rewatch, really speaks to you, and you get swept up in the emotion a little bit more.
I think she put on a really good performance, Scarlett.
Scarlett Johansson?
She had a fantastic 2019.
Oh, yeah. She's picked up a Best Supporting Actress nomination for this, and then a Best Actress nomination for Marriage Story. But she's got some awesome performances she's put in over the years. I think back to something as early as Lost in Translation, where she hits that out of the park.
She's only young.
With Bill Murray. I know. We've just about got another Meryl Streep on our hands here. She's easily got another 40 years out of her. I cannot wait.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
Do you remember her performance in Her as the robot voice that Joaquin Phoenix falls in love with?
Fantastic, yeah. And that's,
think about that back in 2012. What a bunch of heavy hitters.
Oh, she's had she's a star in the Marvel films. She's just had a massive year. She must be one of the most well-paid actresses around.
Deservedly so.
That relationship that she had with the son was really touching at times, and the battle there between him being a Nazi, following Hitler, and her. We know, the audience knows that she's not on that side, but
no, and she's quick to challenge the Nazis and challenge his view of the Nazis as well. In one of the earlier scenes, when she takes Jojo, having just about blown himself up and now covered in scars from throwing a hand grenade and bouncing it off a tree, she visits Kleisendorf, played by Sam Rockwell, and Finkel, and also Rebel Wilson's character, visits them at this Nazi building, and as soon as she walks in, she punches Kleisendorf and knees him in the gut, and you go, whoa, she was just a force of nature throughout her time here. It was amazing.
Very strong lead. She obviously had a relationship with that Sam Rockwell character, and we can talk about that a little bit later. I've got some opinions on that and some deep dive, but my first watching, going back to what I asked you before, first watching when I saw this,
we got lost there for a minute, didn't we?
We always get lost. The first time I watched it, I was shocked when we saw those feet, and they'd built up so fantastically well. Was showing her shoes in certain scenes earlier.
Very Spielberg. Just the red shoes hanging. And did you notice as well that the film by that point had lost almost all of its colour? We had the whole city was bleak and grey and beige compared to earlier when there's lots of bright blues and greens and even yellows, particularly inside Jojo and Rosie's house. Then her feet hanging, it's just red. That's it.
Yeah, and this is another underrated element of the film, just the atmosphere, the sets. It was shot in Prague, and it was just an outstanding job what they did there. First viewing, I was shocked, and they did a great job, as I said, building up to that with certain scenes with her dancing. You could see the feet. I don't think they forced it down our throats. Upon a second viewing, obviously, I was looking out for it a little bit more, and I think there was 3 or 4 shots where you could see her feet really prominently.
Yeah, did you notice how even some of the camera work was done in those shots where you could see Scarlett Johansson's feet? It was we'd get this medium shot of Jojo, and then it would pan up, and as it panned up, a character would kneel down to, or a character would kind of come down to his level, and that's how we kept our focus on Jojo. Not only being the protagonist, having most of the screen time, but just being a coming-of-age story. Everything is about him wanting to enter their world, and every time it would pan up and someone's talking to him, it would pan up to her, and then that final pan up to her, wasn't such a nice sight.
Good person.
You two seem to be getting on well.
She doesn't seem like a bad person. I'm the enemy.
You're not a Nazi, Jojo. You're a 10-year-old kid who likes dressing up in a funny uniform and wants to be part of a club.
Yeah, what did you think of Taika Waititi's performance as Hitler throughout the film, making in this bumbling imbecile? And,
I thought he was
the
fantastic.
Nazis on the whole, he was. That's where a lot of the criticism for the movie came from, though. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I thought he was fantastic. I thought it added a great comedic touch to it that it needed. There was some good banter there with the cigarettes, always offering him a cigarette, and then eventually he just says, I don't want a cigarette, I'm 10.
And how subtle were just some of those touches when he'd offer the cigarette and Jojo would wave it away. There's lots of that being set up and paid off through every scene.
There's a lot of foreshadowing.
Such a good script.
Yeah, it's really, really fantastic script. And he wrote the script by himself, didn't he? Really, really outstanding.
Yeah, he adapted this from a book, Caging Skies. But, I mean, considering how many of these sequences, there was a setup and a payoff, that, yeah, it was great.
Even that last scene with Hitler, how he completely turns. He's got a wound
Hitler
shot
back
on his
from
head.
the dead.
Didn't he? I think that was implied where he had a bandage on his head like he had shot himself. Because
there was no bandage. He had a bullet wound on his head.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
right.
Like, you know, at times we thought we were watching like a PG or a kids film, and sure enough, there's Hitler standing there with a bullet wound. But even I think back to another sequence a bit earlier. I think this is after we have one really touching scene between Elsa and Jojo, and Hitler gives this really rousing monologue, and Taika Waititi was clearly channeling some propaganda footage of Hitler giving speeches, and that was very, very that was a real brush with reality there.
There's just so many memorable parts about this movie. Every section of the movie is quotable. There's so many outstanding.
How many quotes
parts.
have you got written down?
A lot, and they're not just from one character. It's from everyone. It's from Jojo. It's from Hitler. It's from Alfie Allen and Rebel Wilson's characters. Actually, I don't think Alfie Allen even said a word, did he?
Oh, I think he had a couple lines throughout, but he was just great there as a foil for Kleisendorf, for Sam Rockwell to bounce off of. And Rebel Wilson playing it 100% straight. Some of the dialogue and lines she had to deliver. She was great.
And the accent was so bad from Rebel. I don't know if
accents from everyone. No one tried. No one gave it.
But it made it even more funny where even Hitler's accent was going in and out of Maori. Rebel Wilson was Australian / I don't know what, German.
I don't know what she was going for.
she was good though. She's always funny for me. She how many kids did she say she had? 14?
She pumped out 18 for the fatherland. Look,
apparently
pretty good
that was a real
18
thing.
Kids. I don't know about you. Look, I would not be surprised.
Alfie Allen, touching on him, he always gets these weird roles from Game of Thrones to this. I mean, can this guy just play a normal character?
Oh, where's the fun in that? Do you remember his turn in? Do you remember his turn in the first John Wick?
Oh, yeah, how can you not?
Oh, and who was the villain in that? I suddenly just have this flashback to Alfie. I can't remember Alfie Allen's character, but he's talking about whose car he stole, and do you know whose car he stole? He killed 3 men with a fucking pencil.
Jackson, a standout scene for me, I have to say, in this film, and we're moving all over the place here, guys, so bear with us.
It's very fun to talk about.
We're going from the end to the start, back to the end. The scene with Stephen Merchant.
Stephen Merchant, the Gestapo gang.
That section was fantastic. Hail Hitler.
Hail Hitler. Hail Hitler. Hail Hitler. Hail Hitler. Hail Hitler.
31 times in 1 minute.
My God. And what was it? So what were you doing here? We were highly hitting the boy, and then we were highly hitting the girl, and then we were highly hitting you. Hail Hitler. Hail Hitler. How tense was it?
It was so tense as well as this is what I'm saying. I think some of these critics got it wrong, saying that the tonal shifts weren't right. That scene is perfect for showcasing how intense and dramatic it can be while being funny.
And Michael Giacchino's score is really swelling during that sequence when Sam Rockwell's having a look at having a look at Elsa's fake papers that have been taken from Inga, Jojo's dead sister, having died of the flu, which is pretty topical. And the sound swelling, we're editing and cutting between the different people in the room, and it felt like something out of a Tarantino film. In fact, there are a lot of different... Yeah, there are a lot of nods to other World War II movies. There's really obvious nods to Spielberg stuff with Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan, particularly during the town invasion sequence with the tank. And yeah, that was straight out of Inglourious Basterds, straight out of that basement scene. And it was cutting. We're waiting for something to happen, and that breath of relief. Did you notice that every time Jojo was in a real tense situation, a real stressful sequence, we'd then externalize his monologue when he'd pop up in a scene with Hitler? So even early on, if Jojo would have an argument with his mum, or things wouldn't quite things would go awry with Elsa.
After the fact, we'll talk about it with Hitler.
Yeah, after the fact, every time, then we'd learn about Jojo's thoughts and how
that was a great insight on what he was thinking
with Hitler. Yeah, and just having that was perfect, because early on you see Taika Waititi dressed up and you go, oh my God, what kind of movie are we in for here? But it was really effective.
Very effective in telling the information that we didn't know that we needed to know as an audience member.
Yeah, and if we are going to watch Jojo grow, and this is really a coming-of-age story, which Taika Waititi is perfect at. All of his films, even Thor Ragnarok, are about it and about finding a sense of identity. Him having that internal monologue with an external figure, here being Hitler, and then finally abandoning him at the end, it's pitch perfect.
And let's not discount Stephen Merchant's performance, even if it was a small segment.
Oh, so great! And when he's walked up to Sam Rockwell, and he's just leaning over him. He's got to be standing on stilts. Even he's a foot taller.
Apparently, he was standing on a box. So just to create the effect of how tall and how intimidating this guy is, and he did come across intimidating. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, and I loved how him and the rest of the Gestapo members were just all knockoffs of Major Tot from Raiders of the Lost Ark, another World War II film. They've all got the rounded glasses and the black fedoras and the black trench coats. Oh, fantastic. Hilarious!
And it was a really good scene in the fact that that's where we see Sam Rockwell's character really open up and help. We see a bit more into this man where he obviously sees the date and it's wrong, but he lets them go. To me, that says one or two things. He either has regret from his past helping with this propaganda and he doesn't really follow it anymore. He's trying to make better of his situation now, or it tells me he was in cahoots with Scarlett Johansson's character Rosie, where those two maybe he had an alliance with her or helped her with her.
Yeah, it could be. I'm going to sit on the fence a little bit, and it could certainly be both. Especially early on, he's clearly disillusioned with his position as a part of the Nazis. He wants to go to war, he wants to fight, and because he's lost use of one of his eyes, they've told him that's no good, and he has that hilarious sequence when he's shooting everything in front of the kids, and he's firing the gun under his leg, and then he's shooting this, shooting that. He's clearly showing off, and as the film goes on, we get exposed to a little bit more of him, and I think he was just a good person. What did you think of Sam Rockwell's performance?
I thought it was great, even though he was coming in and out of that accent. And he had a dialect coach as well for this. Bear that in mind. Right. It was obviously implied that him and Alfie were gay. I mean, especially by that end scene, I think
it was genius, wasn't it? I thought that was a fantastic touch.
It slowly built and built. Yeah, it was great. He played a really integral part. I thought like I said, I think he had a personal relationship with that Rosie character, and it was evidenced by the lines when Jojo had that accident. The first line, or one of the first lines he said, was, "Your mother's going to kill me," right? So that, to me, that means he know, and obviously she did. She punched him and slapped him, and we had that hilarious exchange then. Then when the Gestapo came and raided the house, he saved Jojo again. So that's 2 times now. And then in the last scene we see him, he saves Jojo again. To me, that has to...
I think...
Progression. It's a great progression of this character. And it pays off.
Yeah, and it's a great progression of, it's a great way to continue and further Jojo's journey towards becoming a man, because in Kleisendorf, he does have a positive role model and a positive father figure compared to his own version of Adolf Hitler that he spends most of his time with early on. And I don't know about you, but it was really heartwarming for me to see Kleisendorf in that final battle sequence dressed up in full regalia, and he's got the helmet with the feathers, and he even has Alfie Allen's Finkel next to him with the record player, the phonographer. And I saw that, and I remember in the cinemas thinking, wow, this is bold, this is audacious, but I loved it.
It's a serious tone, and to have something so flamboyant.
It's a massive tonal shift, yeah. But you know, you see that, and obviously he's sacrificed for Jojo, and then from there, that's it. Jojo has now become a man. He's seen a male make a really, really positive change and really help someone along. And yeah, Sam Rockwell, great, but the screenplay to have all this there, phenomenal.
How can he come up with a screenplay like this? I'd love to know what that material was. What was the book you said it was based off?
The book was called Caging Skies, and on the second rewatch, Dan, I was thinking the same thing. I wonder how much of this is adapted, and you'd like to think a lot, but a lot of this is echoed in Taika Waititi's work. Everything he does, it's always a sense of finding identity and finding yourself and being confident in yourself.
And let's not forget, this guy can act as well. And he can direct, and
write,
and write. Like, he's a triple threat, isn't he?
He is very much an auteur.
You're growing up too fast. 10-year-olds shouldn't be celebrating war and talking politics.
Well, if we flash back to the opening credits with the German rendition of "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and then this spin on not Beatles mania but Hitler mania, which was very much a real thing with the youth. What did you think about that?
It set the tone, didn't it, for this film?
Yeah, very sardonic, where it's cynical but just really mocking.
It's mocking Hitler. That is the tone of the film. That is what Taika set out to do. He wanted to show this guy in a bad light, and he did it in a goofy way. And showing these real-life images across this song, as I said, set the tone of this comedic film with serious tones. And that's what we got throughout the whole film.
It very much plays into the tagline that was set up for this movie as well, which was an anti-hate satire. But, I mean, clearly he hates the Nazis. Can't blame him.
I think the music soundtrack throughout was fantastic. It was a bit out there. It wasn't traditional in terms of the actual songs mixed with Michael's score. I thought it played a really integral part. Michael Giacchino's played a real integral part in the film and its serious and comedic parts.
And bookending the film, as well as the German rendition of the Beatles track, we then had David Bowie's "Heroes" sung in German. What did you think? We can be
heroes just for one day.
What, you don't know it in German? Come on, mate. We did German in high school. Give it your best.
I thought the whole ending with Jojo and Elsa was a nice touch, and that song rounded it off. Let's go into Elsa and the character. We haven't talked about her. She put on a great performance. She's actually a New Zealander as well.
Yeah, Taika Waititi certainly likes to cast his fellow countrymen in some of his films, and Tomasin Mackenzie, she does really well, considering a lot of the sequences are just her and Jojo. And yeah, she does some great stuff, and really puts in a strong performance, giving us some backstory into Elsa. And she mentions Nathan, who we later learn may or may not have been a fiance, at least someone who passed, and has some real emotional moments talking about her parents that were taken to a death camp. So some of those things on the first watch felt a little, oh geez, this is getting really dark really quick, but again, it's not too bad this time around.
I wouldn't have been able to know she was a New Zealander. I thought she was, if anyone did the accent well, it was her. She put on a really great performance, very innocent, troubled.
Innocent, but really dominated the screen and had a great presence, especially opposite Roman Griffin Davis, who did an awesome job too.
She really took charge in a lot of those scenes, didn't she?
Yeah, and that's what Jojo needed. He was clearly looking to his mother and a female figure to take charge. He didn't quite have the confidence within himself, and then by the end of it, sure enough, he did. I mean, sure, the dance and the David Bowie song is great, but Jojo goes to open the door, and Elsa asks him, "Is it dangerous out there?" And we get that subtle wink and that nod to earlier when Rosie tells Jojo it's extremely dangerous. And what does he say to Elsa? Yes, extremely. What a screenplay.
Oh, fantastic. And even this relationship that they build across multiple scenes, he eventually becomes in love with her. This is one part of the film I think maybe I would have changed. And look, I don't want to change anything. This is a phenomenal film. It
definitely deserved the best picture nod.
Definitely. But maybe I would have liked to see her as a best friend and not a lover in that sense. He's only a young boy.
He's a young boy discovering what love is, and he doesn't quite understand. He doesn't understand what kind of love it is. And Elsa's kind of playing on that. She's a little older, a little wiser, and being female, she's going to be more mature than him anyway. But by the end of it, it does kind of wrap up neatly that they're not necessarily in love like that. It's just more so a strong bond between the two.
I feel like that's the storyline, the main storyline here. That's obviously been adapted from that book that you were talking about. This was the real meat and bones of that book. The relationship between these two characters.
You've only got 108 minutes here to really nail the relationship between the two. In a novel, you've got page after page after page if you want to develop it. And considering how many sequences we did get, they did an awesome job here.
I don't think it dragged. I saw a lot of comments that the film was slow and the first act took a while to introduce her. So to me...
A while to introduce? What? 15 minutes we had Jojo blowing himself up and then he's in the hospital.
That's what I mean. I feel like some of these critics, do they even watch these films? Seriously.
I don't think so. This got a best editing nomination. So I don't really know how it's too slow.
In saying that though, I think a lot of people would say the same thing about me giving The Lighthouse a 5 out of 10.
Yeah, we're going to go into that in a future episode. Don't you worry, sir. There won't be... I don't think we're doing as much agreeing as we are here.
No, definitely not. Elsa, yeah, she was a phenomenal performance. We saw the progression of her character across, 108 minutes, did you say?
Yes.
And then the payoff at the end where she finally gets to escape this room. I think pretty much all her scenes were in that one room or in the one house. She probably would have loved that final scene.
Yeah, exactly. Finally got some sunlight.
What's funny is Rebel Wilson went on record and said that she spent a month in Prague but only had 6 days shooting. So she did a lot of chilling out, she said. A lot of time to chill, which is interesting. I mean, why would she be there for that long?
Well, it's not uncommon to have your actors around for the production, maybe get their insights, rehearse some sequences, and who knows, Taika Waititi being writer-director, things change all the time in Hollywood productions, and even something like this in a $14 million budget, who's probably writing and rewriting stuff, so you want to have your cast and crew around there just in case. You get the feeling that Searchlight Pictures or Fox, who funded this, probably just gave him creative control and free reign after Thor Ragnarok and said, hey, whatever movie you want to make, go make it. He comes back and says, here's what I've got. I'm going to play Hitler. They go, oh, not sure, but off you go.
Well, I don't know. Is that how it happened? I thought he did a lot of the funding, but I could be wrong there.
Oh, he probably did. Let's just spin our fun narrative. Why
what
not?
Was the... Do you have the budget there?
Yeah, this was a $14 million picture, and globally it went on to gross $90 million. So it was certainly...
$14 million? That seems really low. Success. Wow.
It doesn't seem like much, considering you said the costume design's awesome, and just the production design in general, especially later on when we start getting a lot less of those bright, colourful buildings and things are crumbling after an invasion, and we even get a big battle sequence, and they did a lot of good stuff with not very much money.
They've done a fantastic job for $14 million. I mean, that's actually astounding to me.
Well, hey, a couple episodes ago, we talked about The Invisible Man, a Blumhouse production, and that was $7 million. It's gone on to do $100. So there are some... You don't necessarily need to blow $100 million on a big picture to get something that looks good.
Do you reckon Scarlett's paycheck was what, half of that?
Yeah, probably. Look, there's actors unions and SAGs and things like that out there. She probably did something to scale. And considering we've got Sam Rockwell and Alfie Allen, Rebel Wilson, they're not necessarily a cheap cast either.
No. And what did you say it returns? 78 million?
90. Come on, mate. Bit of a
million,
lowball there.
wow. And that would obviously been propelled by the Oscar noms, but still really, really great success for Taika. In terms of the editing, Jackson, is that something that stood out to you?
Yeah. What did you think of some of the hip hop editing early on? Hip hop editing is something closely associated with Guy Ritchie or Darren Aronofsky, or even some earlier stuff from Sam Raimi, like the Evil Dead movies, where there's lots of zoom-ins, lots of quick pans, lots of really fast cutting. You might get 6 or 7 cuts within a few seconds. We kind of had that scene where Jojo,
Sam Rockwell's shooting? Is that what you're
Sam
of?
Rockwell's shooting, and Jojo is tooling up when he's putting on his Gestapo uniform to head outside. What did you think of some of those shots?
I think it worked well. I think this is the sort of stuff that we want to see in films in 2019, 2020. We want to see something different. We don't want the standard cinematography, standard shots. We want to see some of these editors branch out a little bit, and they're being recognized now, these editors. And we saw a really fantastic editing job that I always talk about is Baby Driver. You've obviously seen that.
Yeah, Baby Driver. Pretty good watch. I'd like to see it again. I only saw it for the first time last year. Probably not the best from Edgar Wright. That was certainly a tour de force for film editing. But look, a lot of the film editing does come down to the storyboarding, which is put in from the cinematographer, from the director. So it's not just a one-man effort. But there is some really cool stuff here in Jojo Rabbit. And we touched on earlier some of the pans that they do, from shifting things from Jojo's perspective to him talking to the adults. And then finally at the very end, when Jojo's about to dance with Elsa, they're almost at the same height. They're almost on the same level. And Jojo, he stays on that step. He keeps his head held high. He doesn't necessarily step down. And they're pretty close at eye line. I thought that was really effective and really played into part of this narrative, the subtext of the movie, that it was all about Jojo becoming a man.
Tom Eagles did a fantastic job with this editing, Jackson, and being an aspiring editor myself, I really take a deep dive into how these films are edited. I try and look at what approach they take, and this film was nominated, as we said, for an Oscar. 1 of 5. We're looking at, it was up there with Ford vs. Ferrari, which won. That was a phenomenal edit.
That was a great watch, wasn't it? We should cover
Irishman, which I'm not sure why that was nominated, because I didn't think they even edited a second of that. It was 4 hours long.
It was just Martin Scorsese shooting reel after reel after reel.
Well, apparently it was 6 hours long, so he must have done some editing. Joker, fantastic, and then Parasite. So it's in some strong company there, and rightly so. It's a great job, as you said, the hip-hop cuts, matching those tonal shifts as well. It was such a smooth movie. Everything sort of guided along. You never felt like it dragged. It was a neat package.
For something with a real challenging and tough tone, trying to balance the line between satirical without getting too ridiculous. It did certainly get there at some points, and then had those real bleak and grim tonal shifts. Especially on a rewatch, they nailed it.
Even though the film is a neat package, like I said, I'd actually like to see some of those cut shots, some of those cut scenes. Wouldn't you? Because this is such fun material. Every scene was enjoyable. I'd actually like to see some of the deleted scenes.
Yeah, I'd love to go back and revisit this one. I was a bit concerned, as while I enjoyed it in the cinemas, I didn't think it was anything too outstanding, and was a little surprised when it picked up an Oscar for Best Screenplay and then had some other nominations. But on a rewatch, I'm happy to come back to it time and time again.
And this film obviously was nominated for Best Achievement in Costume Design and Production Design. We touched on it a little bit, Jackson. How do you think that propelled the narrative and the world that we were building here? Well, obviously the film.
I love the subtle touches between the changes in uniform for whatever Jojo was doing. He had this Hitler Youth uniform in a lot of beige when he was at the camp and some scenes after, and he also had a black Gestapo outfit that very much was when it had that real playful tone and real innocent narrative to it. And as we mentioned earlier in the pod, after his mother, Rosie, is killed and he sees her hanging in the street, well, that's it. He's gone. He's, from that point on, is in plain clothes, and the rest of production certainly becomes very, very bleak. We see how the end of the war is affecting not only the whole of Germany, but just this town. He's going through the bin for food scraps and people are looking sickly, and then finally the town invasion sequence when everything is grey. And Rebel Wilson's character kind of makes light of the fact she has this great quote where she says, just get out there and shoot everything. And yeah, who knows where the enemy is, who knows who they are, and just how all that played out was stellar.
And the cinematography as well. I mean, I can't get enough of this film. I really enjoyed it. It's it balances those tonal shifts fantastically. It's got comedy, it's got heart, it's
so quotable.
It can make you cry. I mean, I've seen people cry from this film as well, sitting next to me, you know, a few tears down, and even on a second viewing, seeing that scene with Rosie hanging, I got a little bit teary there. I don't know, maybe maybe the COVID's getting to me now, Jackson, but
it was tough stuff. I got emotional the first time in the cinemas, and again on the rewatch when Kleisendorf is heroically going into battle in his full regalia. For me, that was a real touching moment. That was just he was someone who was unabashedly him, and he kind of made light of the fact. A lot of his lines were, he was very much talking up, I might have some quotes written down here, but he's very much talking up that this is his situation with the Nazis and what they're asking him to do, and he's not quite happy with it, but he's still going to give it his best. And at the end, he really went out giving it his best, and he saves Jojo. Super touching stuff. I love Sam Rockwell.
Me too. He's phenomenal in this film. Archie Yates, Yorkie, even where he says,
warms your heart.
He warms your heart, and then in one of the final scenes with him and Jojo, he says, I'm sorry about your mother. I cried a lot. It was just so sweet. Something about him it warms your heart. And then, obviously, Jojo, Roman Griffin Davis, we've touched on, but he was the standout, wasn't he? He put on a phenomenal performance. Golden Globe nominated, wasn't it?
Yeah, deservedly so. Such a young actor, and I hope to see a hell of a lot more from him. I hope he's going to be around for years to come, because this is a really tough role and some really harsh stuff to play, and he killed it.
He reminds me of another actor, Jacob Tremblay, who was in The Room. Have you seen The Room, 2015 film, A24, Brie Larson?
Oh, well, I've seen The Room. I haven't seen Room. When you're saying The Room, I'm thinking to Tommy Wiseau, you're tearing me apart, Lisa!
This is a completely different film. Room 2015.
Do you want to do an episode on The Room?
Room, we can.
I just like to watch you guys.
Room 2015.
I'm going to keep the rail on this side. I'll stop now.
It's about a boy held captive with his mother and them trying to escape. He did a fantastic job, and Jacob's been in many films since, and he's a very young actor, but he's been in Good Boys, Wonder, Room, Doctor Sleep.
You know who else Roman Griffin Davis reminds me of?
Yeah.
And has now gone on to do a heck of a lot more and some really great stuff. Jamie Bell. Do you remember Billy Elliot?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
If he has a career similar to that, I'm on board.
Yeah. And he had this innocence about him. He portrayed this Nazi boy so well. He was a breath of fresh air, much like the film. Jackson, do you have any behind the scenes for us?
I want to touch on just how some of the critics took to this one. As we've talked about, there were some concerns about the portrayal of the Nazis, of how it was making light of them, and how, despite the tagline being an anti-hate satire, it was still very quick to hate on the Nazis. So let's touch on what the public and the critics thought. So on IMDb at the moment, this sits on a whopping 7.9 out of 10. Really high praise from 180,000 user ratings.
Which is very good.
Very good. Rotten Tomatoes has this at an 80% rating of critics who rated the film have liked it, and an average score of 7.52 from nearly 400 reviews. Then Metacritic has it at a 58 from 57 reviews.
Metacritic's no good. I'm sorry, but Metacritic, they just don't get it right.
Well, look, all of it's bullshit, so who cares?
Yeah, obviously it's a collection of reviewers across the globe, but...
Well, how dare anyone other than us review movies?
Yeah, I understand, but like, if you go into the Metacritic of Jojo Rabbit, someone gave Jojo Rabbit a 0 out of 10. Slant Magazine, Jackson. Keith Ehrlich. Like, seriously, how can
the
you give
renowned
the film
Keith
a 0
Ehrlich.
out
I love
of 10?
some of his work.
Is he a Nazi himself? Maybe that's the only thing I could think of.
Come on, let's not go into that.
And then The Guardian, who are a well-known place, 4 out of 10. It's oddly safe given the subject matter, and the humor is similarly sanitized. I didn't think it played it that safe, but that's
I think this is quite the audacious film, considering we have Scarlett Johansson being hanged. And we have
that's the thing.
Pretty brutal battle sequences. It's not all that safe.
How is that safe? Anyway, what did Letterboxd have it at?
Massive, 4 out of 5. Pretty unheard of on Letterboxd, and it's been watched by almost 250,000 members.
Wow!
So
that's fantastic.
Clearly, filmgoers love it, and so do we.
And Letterboxd, anyone on that app, we respect. Because they're usually real moviegoers that will take a movie in, take it with its stride, and really dissect and appreciate what the artist is trying to do. So,
okay, mate, you can get your nose out of there now.
Yes, we're not sponsored by them yet, anyway.
Yeah,
yet. We like to say that yet.
Yeah, clearly, modern day moviegoers do love this picture, and it'll be interesting to see how this one ages over the years. Taika Waititi's films have this real timeless charm and quality to them, and do really make for great rewatches as we get here. Let's see what audiences think in the next 5 or 10 years. Maybe we can come back and revisit it when we're doing podcast number 6,000.
This'll age well. This'll be a cult classic in 10, 20 years. I think it's got everything that you want in a film.
Would you show this to your kids?
Not at this stage. If I had them, not at this stage. But maybe when they're a little bit older. Maybe around Jojo's age.
This or Schindler's List?
Read each other's minds. But how would you know if you saw one? They could look just like us. Hi.
So, Jackson, your favourite scene in Jojo Rabbit?
Early on, I love the sequence when Rosie, Scarlett Johansson, is challenged by Jojo. He wants to yell at her. I believe this might have been maybe the first time he'd met Elsa in the attic, and he's confronted that Elsa says, well, your mum put me in here, and this is a real shock to Jojo's system. Well, he bites back at Rosie, and she says, well, you wouldn't do that if your father were here. And Jojo says, oh, he's not. He's away fighting in the war, or so Jojo believes. And Scarlett Johansson, she puts on his jacket, she goes to the fireplace, smears the coal on her face, and we get this real touching scene where she plays both father and mother to Jojo, and I loved it. They even dance. It's a couple minutes that are just fantastic. Did you notice as well that when she slams her hand on the table, that Michael Giacchino's score just stops, the record stops?
Mm.
Awesome
a very
stuff.
nice touch,
very
and
touch.
That's the editing as well. That was a great scene. I agree. That was an interesting scene. We got to see, I guess, a little bit of the father through Scarlett's eyes. Yeah, that played off really well, I thought, and then they had a nice embrace at the end.
What was yours?
Really, for me, it was is the scene with Stephen Merchant and that whole section with the Gestapo crew. That was just so funny and so intense that's a standout for me. And anyone who watches this film that I talk about it with, we always mention that scene, Heil Hitler.
Heil Hitler.
It was it was intense, as I said. We saw a lot from Jojo. He was scared. He was really scared for Elsa's character, and she came out and thinked on her feet and then said, I'm his sister, and then that played out. It was just, that's where the screenplay really shined for me.
And we can't forget Stephen Merchant reading through the Yoo-Hoo Jew book.
Oh, how good was that? Yoo-Hoo Jew.
They even have
oh
thorns.
My God.
Oh, Nathan torn apart, Nathan being roasted over a fire.
Yeah, Nathan being run over by a bike. Oh, it was brilliant. So that's my favourite scene. Jackson. And we might as well go into our final ratings, Jackson. I think we've dived deep into Jojo Rabbit. We both thought it was fantastic. Well, I did anyway. What is your final rating, mate?
We would be touching on who we could replace as the leads, but we thought it was fantastic. It's really hard to imagine anyone other than these two young child actors in the roles. Love Sam Rockwell, love Rebel Wilson, Alfie Allen, Captain Cave, Sam Rockwell, and even Stephen Merchant. Final rating, 9 out of 10, grenade strapped to a child soldier.
I didn't expect that. I thought it was going to be 9 Heil Hitlers out of 10. Touching on that segment where we replace the actors, guys, we're going to can that segment. I've made an executive decision, Jackson. It's been canned. Now, we're going to put it to you guys to let me know on Instagram at Dan Allen Movies or the podcast or Jackson on Instagram.
At We Watch This Podcast, at Marshall on Film, on Letterboxd, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. All right, I'll stop hijacking this segment. Back to you.
Let us know what segment you want us to do, whether it's something you've heard before or a made-up segment. Just let us know, and we're gonna get another segment in here, but we're just not sure at the moment. For me, Jackson, the film was fantastic. I can't praise it enough. It had Wes Anderson vibes, as we said. There was a lot of tonal shifts. That worked well. There's a lot to admire about the film: cinematography, costume design, music, acting, goofy portrayals of Hitler to two gay men riding off into battle, Rebel Wilson being blown up after giving a Yorkie a rocket launcher. Just so many random things that are memorable. And for me, it's going to be a 9 out of 10 as well. So 2 9 out of 10s. Astounding praise for Jojo Rabbit. Guys, if you haven't seen it and you made it this far, we've just spoiled the shit.
Then what the hell are you doing?
Just spoiled the shit out of it. So you've made a mistake there.
If you made it this far, roll.
So we highly recommend Jojo Rabbit. Obviously, if you made it this far, we're hoping you've already seen it. Picking away a few movies off our watch list. I have anyway. I hope you have.
I certainly have, mate.
What did you get to watch this week since we last talked?
So this week, I have been streaming the shit out of the watch list, yet it still continues to grow. I don't know how that works. This week, I watched Event Horizon.
Event Horizon?
Okay, so Event Horizon came out in 1997. It's a Paul W.S. Anderson film, most famed for the first Mortal Kombat film and the Resident Evil movies. So, we're really looking at a cinematic masterpiece here. Event Horizon is about a ship that has a gravity drive, a warp drive, that lets it travel between 2 points in the blink of an eye. It opens up a black hole, traverses that black hole, and ends up somewhere else. Now, the ship and the crew have been missing in the far distant future of 2040 for about 7 years. Going in to investigate, since a radar and a message has been popped up, is Sam Neill, who designed the ship, as well as Lawrence Fishburne and his crew, a pre-Matrix, pre-Morpheus Lawrence Fishburne. The film has some terrific production design. It's a sci-fi horror. It has some Lovecraftian themes about what happens when some beings from the other dimension come in and invade. But the wheels really fall off the wagon quickly. It has a really cool... It's got a good first setup and squanders everything. The CGI is rushed. The editing is pretty bad. The sound's terrible. There's awful ADR. There's clearly a ton of cut footage. Supposedly there was about 40 minutes cut from it. And overall, it was just a real dull experience.
I actually watched this a couple of years ago. Well, let me rephrase. I watched the first 30 minutes a couple of years ago. And that's as far as I got. So I can agree with everything you're saying from what I saw anyway.
It tries to it tries to stay as far away from some genre conventions as much as possible, and it does its best to avoid being another Alien ripoff, and it aims for The Shining in space, but it ends up feeling more just like a crappy Hellraiser sequel, or it feels like Jason X, which is that terrible Friday the 13th.
It's got a real B-grade quality to it.
Yeah, and it's... Paul W.S. Anderson gives it a great crack, but he he passed on X-Men to direct that, and I do not know what that bloke was thinking. Overall, it came in for me at 3 out of 10 pens through folded paper.
And I'd probably agree. I reckon it'd come in for the first 30 minutes. I'd probably give it a 3 or 4 out of 10. But
how it has this massive cult following that it does, I don't understand. Apparently, it's currently being adapted into a TV series, and sure, there's some cool elements there to expand on, but
I think it's the sci-fi nerds, and I'm one of them. Sci-fi horror thriller sort of. I guess that's what you could call it, couldn't you? But it's got a lot of cult sci-fi fanatics, I think, that love that sort of stuff.
It's gory, but in some shots, it's so gory. It's a $70 million film that looks like it was made for about 10. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. How did that do in the box office? Do you know?
Yeah, terribly.
Terribly, yeah. Yep, so Leah, stay away from Event Horizon, guys, if you're going to go off our recommendation.
If you want to watch a weird film about beings crossing in from another dimension with Sam Neill, go watch In the Mouth of Madness, which is a John Carpenter picture. If you haven't seen that, Dan, we should sit down and watch it. That's a real rockin' film.
For me, Jackson, I hopped on Disney Plus this week and saw and had a look to see what they're offering. To be honest, not much. I mean, if you're not a Star Wars and Disney fan, there's not much to watch. I mean, because I've seen every Star Wars, every Disney film. There's a couple of animated features there as well, but a lot of it I'd already seen. And one movie stood out. It was called Togo. I hadn't seen it. It was William Dafoe, one of the greatest working actors. Yeah,
I think I've seen maybe a sponsored ad on my social media for it.
One of the greatest working actors alive, in my opinion, William Dafoe, hasn't put a foot wrong in terms of acting from what I've seen from him. Togo was a really, really good film. It was a classic Disney film, the way it was written and told. It's about an untold story of a winter back in 1920. William Dafoe plays this disgruntled man who...
Willem Dafoe disgruntled? I'd never picture it.
He doesn't get along with this dog, and eventually the dog wins him over, and we see the relationship build, and it's about a man and his dog, essentially, the relationship there, and it's really
age-old tale.
It's an age-old tale, but it's really played out well, and it hit home for me. It was really emotional towards the last 20 minutes. Really, I would say the first half of the film drags a little bit. We take a while to get going, but once it gets going and we hit the stride, the relationships built there, it turns into a really fantastic film. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. But as I said, I had some tears flowing, and I'm not usually like that. So if
you are quite the manly man.
If you've got a dog and you want to be in for a bit of a sook, this might be the movie. It's really well put together, so I really recommend it. Togo on Disney Plus. Jackson, that is it for today's episode. Did you have fun?
I had so much fun. Oh my god. What a cracking episode this was. And you know what? I had my reservations about going back to revisit Jojo Rabbit, but Dan, I'm so glad we did. What are we going to cover next week?
Well, Jackson, we put a poll out to the lovely listeners on my Instagram at Dan Allen Movies. We put 2 polls out. First one was a movie from 2019 that you wanted us to review. We put out Parasite, 1917, The Lighthouse, and the fourth one, what was the fourth one?
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it was a battle between two, obviously 1917, Parasite, the 2 leading contenders, and they stood it out there. So we're going to do another poll to finalise which one you guys want to hear. So
I can't wait.
I'll do that as soon as this episode airs. Head over to my Instagram and select that poll. And then another one, we went for some old classics, didn't we, Jackson? We put in Mulholland Drive, Old Boy. What were the other 2? The Prestige. And
Vacation.
And Vacation. That was just a random one
True
that I put in.
Cinematic.
I mean, I put it in for a laugh, but I actually got a few votes. Anyway,
that's disappointing.
It was the least voted. You can be thankful for that. But we had the Prestige and Old Boy battle it out there. So we're gonna put another poll as well that you can answer, and we can either do Parasite in 1917 and Old Boy or the Prestige. So 4 phenomenal films that we can really dive into, Jackson. Have you seen all 4?
I've seen Old Boy. Love it. I saw 1917 a couple times at the cinemas. Parasite. Loved it. Happy to go back. And I've never seen The Prestige.
What'd you think of 1917? You liked it?
I liked it.
Yeah, but not loved.
Well, we have a podcast to record, mate.
All right. Well, yeah, so you guys answer those polls. And what we're going to do next, though, our next film is going to be The Platform, Jackson. We don't know much about this film. We're going in completely blind. It's shot its way up the rankings.
It's a Netflix special.
Yeah, it shot its way up the rankings in Letterboxd. A lot of people have requested it. A lot of you guys have said, get onto this. So I'm not entirely sure if it's going to be absolute trash or good, but we're going to be surprised, aren't we?
I can't wait.
Thanks for watching, guys. Of course, thanks to our sponsor, Displate, for sponsoring today's episode. Displate are thick metal plates with gallery quality prints on. They easily stick to your wall. Look great in any room or office or environment. I've got 5 in my room. Jackson's got a few coming as well.
I've currently got some Sam Rockwell and Rebel Wilson classics. So I've got Charlie's Angels on the way, and I've also got Fat Pizza from Rebel Wilson.
And I don't even know if they have either of those. But anyway, I always enjoy when you chime in. They're an easy magnet mounting system. Doesn't take any nail tapes or power tools. And we've got a code for you guys to use, OFF21. OFF21.
OFF21? Is that 21% off?
21% off your order.
I think I'll have to order even more.
Yeah. And that's if you're ordering 20, you're going to get 5 for free. Is that how maths works? 4 for free.
Look, if maths were our strong suit, we probably wouldn't be recording a podcast about movies.
No. And yeah, so OFF21 guys, they support us and we support them. Thanks for listening as always, guys. We really appreciate it. You can find us on all social media platforms, in particularly Instagram at Dan Allen Movies, as I said, Marshall on Film _ and
at Marshall on Film followed by an _. And please check out our podcast social media at We Watch This Podcast, Instagram, Letterboxd, Facebook and Twitter. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd love to see some requests, and let's get in touch.
And also hop into on our YouTube and subscribe and like and comment as well. We appreciate that. And of course, if you have your own podcast or want to come on and leave a question for this podcast, just get in touch with us and we'll be happy to facilitate. Thanks as always, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening.